Hello and welcome to another episode of AppStories back home after WWDC. This episode is brought to you by Notion. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Vitici. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. We're back home. We're jet lagged and all the fun things, you know? It's nice to be back. I do, after every WWDC, when it's about time to leave, like I get that sort of like post-conference nostalgia, you know? Just because we both work from home, and it doesn't really happen that often that you get to hang out with not just your colleagues, you know, from international or US media, people that we know on social media, people that we know for our work, but also to hang out with developers and just, you know, you run into the occasional listener or reader. And it's just so concentrated in 3-4 days that I do get that. Like, I'm obviously happy to be back home with my dogs and with Silvia in Italy.
Right.
But at the same time, it's you get that nostalgia. Also, it doesn't help that Apple Park is such a beautiful place. It's very natural, and I did a lot of walking at Apple Park this year, just in between briefings and demos. So it's kind of coming back from a vacation. You miss that vacation, you know, even though it was work, even though it was about work.
Yeah, there was a lot of work going on, but I totally get where you're coming from. I mean, especially Wednesday, I think, is when it really hit me because by around, late morning, both of us were finished with everything, and we were hanging out with Chris Lawley, and Chris had to go home, and that was,
And you start saying your goodbyes.
You say your goodbyes to Chris, and then we caught up with Dave Smith and Vidit Bhargava for a little while, and we kind of knew when we were talking to the two of them that those were the last two people we were probably going to hang out with because we had to get you back to the hotel so you could go to the airport, and then I left pretty early the next morning. So yeah, it is always kind of bittersweet leaving because you see so many people who you haven't seen in a long time, and it's always nice to have those mini reunions crammed in between all the work.
Yeah, I kind of want to talk about the vibes and the behind the scenes of WWDC, sort of like a meta commentary about the event.
Yeah, I do too, because I think that that's important, especially since when I spent a little time on the flight home looking at some of the coverage from people who were not there, and I think it's a very different experience being there versus kind of analyzing it in maybe of a more clinical way from the outside based on press releases and things.
Yeah. So what are the things we can talk about? So from my perspective, I am kind of sad that I missed, I got to the morning of the keynote, basically just in time for the keynote. And that was because I was being sort of grouped with international media. In fact, if you take a look at the pictures that we shared from the keynote, in our group of friends, I was the only one with a yellow badge. And I think John Gruber came up to me and was like, "Hey, what, you got a yellow badge?" And that was because I was considered international media coming from Italy. And so there were different logistics for US media and international media, and we had to wait until the very last moment to be sort of transferred and be able to enter Apple Park. And I was very bummed. I was like, "Oh, I'm missing out on the free breakfast for the press," because I remember that they had really nice pastries a couple of years ago, and I was like, "But I gotta get there, and I want to sit with John and Chris and Jason and Dan." And so, despite sort of PR people and the people who were sort of there managing the crowd being like, "International media this way, international media this way," I was like, "I don't care. I'm going to my US friends." Nobody told me anything, thankfully, but a few people noticed, were like, "What, you have a yellow badge?" And so, but ultimately it was fine. How was the breakfast, John?
So yeah, let me paint you a little bit of a picture of going in as U.S. press, which was I stayed at a hotel that was like less than 5-minute walk from the entrance. They did not take us through the visitor center entrance. They took us kind of in through the opposite side of Apple Park, which they've done a couple of times in the past. And I was really glad that they did it this way because I could just get up, leave my hotel, and walk over. Well, here's the thing. Nobody walks to places in California. They drive. And so as I walked up to the gate, there was a security guy, and he had not been told anything about letting people in for press, even though there was this constant stream of cars coming through the driveway that were all the press people in their Ubers and in their rental cars going in and parking and getting ready to be taken on golf carts from that entrance to Cafe Max, which is pretty far from that entrance. And so I was there showing the guy my email, saying this is from PR, showing him my badge, basically convincing him to let me walk through the gate instead of having to go back. I literally could have walked. It might have even been faster if I'd walked 5 minutes back to my hotel, got in my rental car, and driven back than it was to get through the door. That's something that I would like to. I mean, I think that they ought to have anticipated. But in any event, I got in, and it was funny because I could see Jason and Dan and a couple of other people in the distance who were kind of looking at me, and they're like, "I can see you were being hassled," because they came in a car as I was trying to convince the guy to let me in. But I got in, and Chris was there, and Dan Morin and Jason, and we went through our own security check, which was, I was glad I was there early because it actually took quite a while. They made me take a lot of stuff out of my bag. And then we got on a golf cart and went over to Cafe Max. And what they do is, just like past years, they really separate the press from the developers. The developers are all down on the ground floor in Cafe Max, finding their seats. I think that they have food for them there too. And then we're up on a mezzanine level with just the press. And I will tell you, there were fewer people on that mezzanine level than in the past years. There were definitely fewer up there. And it's a very good breakfast, just healthy stuff, some pastries, some coffee. They had this really cool coffee machine, Federico, that I wish you had been able to see because I had not seen this before at Apple Park. They actually had us on the mezzanine that was the opposite side from the one that you were at a couple of years ago. And there was this counter, and there was an iPad, and then there was this spigot that came out with a little grate under it. And I looked at it, and I was like, there was no machine, like no coffee machine, no thing for grinding beans.
You had to use the iPad?
There was no tank of water. No, there was literally just an iPad and this spigot, like a hooked spigot.
Okay.
And you go to the iPad, and they have like 4 options of different kinds of coffee. You tap it, you hold your cup under the spigot, and it just, all the machinery was below the counter somewhere, and it was made and came out piping hot. It was wonderful. I've never seen anything like it.
And they say you can get coffee done on an iPad. And here you are proving them wrong. Wow.
Exactly. It was wild.
Quick mention about the food. Because
sure.
I do have feedback to share to Apple about the food. I shared this feedback in person a couple of years ago. Now I'm doing it on a podcast. As an Italian, I obviously always have comments about the food that we get in the press area at the visitor center. I have to report a drastic improvement in terms of the espresso quality compared to 2 years ago. That they always had really good espresso in the little porcelain, little espresso cups. So good job. But I have to file a complaint about the actual food because in California, they seem to have this thing where they put onions and garlic everywhere. Even in the vegetarian options, because I don't eat meat, so I wanted to have the vegetarian options, there was always onions and garlic, like all the time. And not the greatest.
That seems like a very un-Italian thing to say, though. I would think. I mean,
look,
Italians.
That's a stereo. No.
Come on, you use onions and garlic in a lot of
Yes, in moderation.
dishes.
In moderation.
Okay.
I mean, and also like raw onion is can be a little.
It's a little overpowering.
It's a little overpowering, especially when you try to talk. Especially when you need to talk to a lot of people in person that week.
I know. You don't want to have a bunch of onion and garlic breath while you're walking around meeting people.
More sort of behind the scenes of WWDC. Let me ask you, John, when given the option, and by that I mean if you were not like running late to a briefing or pressed for time, when given the option, did you prefer to take the golf cart or to walk?
Oh, I always prefer to walk. I like walking.
Me too.
And I really like, because you can kind of take in the landscaping. I mean, the landscaping the environment of Apple
beautiful.
Park is beautiful.
Yes.
The trees and the grasses and the flowers and the shrubs, it's all very, very, very nice in there. And I enjoy just kind of taking it in and getting a little exercise. We got, I would say we were on our feet a lot, but I wouldn't say that we walked a lot because a lot of times we were in golf carts, right?
Yeah, this year I walked a lot. And
Did you? I walked a fair amount, but not as much as
I walked a lot.
would have liked.
Also, for reasons that will be clear in a few days. I had to walk a lot because I had a lot of meetings, a lot of things that I had to get to. But walking, especially, I walked to the Steve Jobs Theater a lot. Because a lot of those briefings were sort of happening,
which is
there.
on a pretty big hill. It's a pretty good
hill,
hike up that hill.
But it gives you a nice opportunity to take in the scenery and breathe some actual fresh air. And also, like you're walking there with the PR person, and you get to have a brief conversation with the PR person. Get to know the people who typically send you press releases and comments and statements. Just emails. So you get to have a little chat, and you get to have a walk, and it's nice. We got to see. Even though we didn't take pictures, but we got to see the observatory, which is the new sort of building in a hill that they have.
You know how I described it to people? I said it's like a Hobbit house, but it's futuristic space Hobbit house because it's completely built into a hill. It's a pretty big open meeting space.
You're getting from the back, which is sort of like a secret passageway that you have.
Yeah, there's just like this little path that is off to the side from the Steve Jobs Theater, and you go in, and there's like a little lobby, and they had a lot of people probably saw this on social media. It's the only thing we could take a picture of, which was it said hello in glass. The typical Apple hello font, all in clear glass, kind of because I guess liquid glass.
Yeah.
And it was a very nice sculpture. It was hard to take a good picture of it because the stone of the wall behind is very light too. But we took some pictures of that. But then you go into this very big room, and I'm sure that the setup changes for whatever they're using it for. But for us, it was a lot of tables where we were learning about the iPad and some other things. Yeah. And then there's this giant oval-shaped window that looks like if you're on the deck of a spaceship.
Here's how I thought of it. Right? It's like this pill-shaped window, obviously with rounded corners. And when I saw it reminded me, have you seen in the iOS 26 beta that they changed the look of the on-off toggles? And they're like elongated pill-shaped toggles.
That's the one thing about this design that I can't stand. Well, I thought it was a bug, but then it's not because it's in all the screenshots and all the official materials.
Yeah, well, the observatory window is kind of like that, and because you're higher up, you have this beautiful view. Like it's looking over. It's an observatory, so you are observing the ring of Apple Park. Really nice view.
Do you think that's where Tim Cook sits and makes sure all the workers are doing their work?
I mean,
he's observing them through binoculars.
I would, especially because I noticed in the pictures that I took of the ring from a distance with the 5x lens, if you zoom in, you can see the desks, you can see the computers if you zoom into the pictures. So I have to assume that if you have binoculars, you can just sit there and take a look at what the engineers are doing inside.
Yeah. Well, while we're still talking about the observatory and the Steve Jobs Theater, one thing that was kind of cool is when we went to the movie, we watched.
We cannot comment on the movie. We cannot review the movie.
I am not going to comment on the movie.
We can say that it was enjoyable. Right? It was enjoyable.
We were there. We had a good time. But what I was going to comment on was not the movie, but the fact that we were at the Steve Jobs Theater at night. And I've never seen that building at night, both inside and outside, was very beautiful because there was lit. The circular ceiling had rows of lights kind of radiating out like a bicycle spokes, I guess. And when you left the building, looking into the building looked really cool at night. And then you could turn and you'd see Apple Park, and that was all lit up, and it looked fantastic.
Yeah,
both perspectives.
It was not my first time at the Steve Jobs Theater at night because
it was my first time.
Yeah, in 2023 I had briefings late in the evening, but it's always a sight with all those lights on the ceiling when you turn. I also got to spend some time in the Steve Jobs Theater with less than 10 people inside during the week without music playing. And it was oddly quiet. It felt
Oh
like
yeah, I was the
almost a
same way.
library silence.
This episode of AppStories is brought to you by Notion. Notion AI is an all-in-one AI powered by your work and all in one place. It automatically captures meeting notes, instantly finds the exact content you need, drafts detailed documents for you, and lets you chat with the best AI models. Notion AI just became twice as powerful for teams, making it the best AI tool for work. Notion's been great for work for a long time because it allows you to take notes, draft documents, and create a knowledge base for everything you do that's searchable and shareable with your team. And with Notion AI, you can do a lot more and save time by finding things again using natural language searches, summarizing long sets of documents, pulling tasks out of meeting notes, and a whole bunch more. AI meeting notes means that you can get every idea, decision, and next steps captured in Notion. And it can capture anything, whether it's a meeting, one-on-one conversation, lecture, or even a podcast episode. And it works on any meeting platform, or just use your system audio. Transcriptions and summaries means you can find past ideas, insights, and decisions alongside your other information. Notion has top AI models built right in. Choose from the best AI models for the task. ChatGPT 4.1, Claude 3.7 Sonnet, and chat with it directly in Notion. No separate subscription or tab needed. It's used by over half of the Fortune 500 companies, and teams that use Notion send fewer emails, cancel more meetings, and save time searching for their work. They also reduce spending on tools and keep everyone on the same page. The fastest growing companies like OpenAI, Ramp, Versal use Notion AI to make processes faster and help their teams stay ahead. Check out Notion, the best AI tool for work, right now at notion.com/appstories. That's all lowercase letters, notion.com/appstories to try the powerful all-in-one Notion AI today. And when you use our link, you're supporting our show. That's notion.com/appstories. Our thanks to Notion for their support of the show. Federico, we really ought to talk about the vibes from
Yes.
developers too, because one thing that I wish I had time to spend more time with more developers. There is a fair amount of separation between press and developers, but
Yes.
we still had plenty of time.
Which is unfortunate if you ask me. And this is like another thing about my feedback. Like, I really do wish we spoke about this in person. I think I mentioned this to somebody at Apple. Like, I wish there was a more communal space for press and developers to sort of socialize more. But yeah, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, no. So, but we did have chances to speak to developers kind of in between the keynote and the State of the Union, because we were moving back and forth to the visitor center and in other parts. And before we watched the movie and things like that, we saw some developers. And I got to say, I think that the vibes are pretty good. I think people were pretty happy with what was announced. What do you think?
Yeah, it's so funny because like when you're in town, you get all these I would say overall positive vibes from developers, right? And people who are there. You develop, I think, a really different perspective from the people at home. And I don't mean by this, I don't mean to say that the people at home don't know what they're talking about. And maybe I'm sure it's the place, it's the energy of you seeing your friends, of you being at Apple Park, but you develop a certain enthusiasm or maybe optimism for the things that are coming, and you get to talk to engineers, so you get to have a little more color, a little more context about the announcements. But then you come back home and you open Blue Sky or you open Mastodon and you see all the negative takes. At least that's what's happened to me when I open social media or RSS. I saw, oh boy, what happened here? It's like you open your RSS and the room is on fire. That's what it felt like. So it's all, and look, it's not like a this year thing. It always happens.
Right.
I think when you're home, you're able to take in more information. You don't have the context from the people. Maybe you don't necessarily get to have the technical details from developers, and so you are. And I know because I've done this before. You are more inclined to gravitate toward the hot take and toward the more cynical side. I think it's only natural, but it's a difference worth mentioning. I think as humans we are naturally inclined to behave in that way. I know I've done it before, and this year when I came back home and I opened RSS and social media, it was the same all over again.
Yeah, well, and I think to a degree that it's like a self-selecting crowd too, because
Yes.
people who are willing, who want, put in for a ticket to go as a developer,
They're happy that they're there.
yeah, they want to be there, and in a way that the people who decided it's not worth it don't, and so that's a little bit self-selecting. But I do feel like you get a chance to really get a gauge on what people are excited about, and I think. One of the things that I saw a lot from the outside was, oh, Apple's still so far behind on AI, and they didn't announce anything. And, I think people were expecting maybe a chatbot, or I don't even know what they were expecting. But I think that if you were there and you really started and you thought about the APIs that are available to developers, there was a lot for developers to be happy about in the AI sphere, because they are able to do kind of unfettered prompting of Apple's model and other models within their code. And they also have other things where they can apply AI tools to their apps in a way that isn't like a chatbot, but is probably for a developer making a very specific app is probably more valuable, I think, at the end of the day.
I think so. And that was also like the one positive thing that I noticed when I came back home is that I saw a lot of developers on social media actually saying, yeah, the foundation models, the foundations model framework that they did is actually pretty good. Like, so it seemed to be like some general consensus there. Even though it wasn't a chatbot and it wasn't a Siri LLM, the developer consensus on the foundational model framework seems to be good. So that's nice.
It solves problems for them. It solves problems like they don't have to pack in their own LLM with their inside their app. It solves pricing things where they don't have to, pay for an API for like ChatGPT or Claude. It solves a lot of different privacy issues too. There's a lot of things there that are going to be really useful for developers, I think.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we should mention about sort of things that we saw, things that we did? Yes, I have something. They had new merch at the Visitor Center Apple Store. They had the hoodies this year. So the hoodie was the hot item of the week, and it was an $80 hoodie, which I had to buy because otherwise my girlfriend gets upset if I don't come back with the new exclusive item from the Cupertino Apple Park Apple Store.
Oh, I didn't know that Sylvia was behind your large purchases. Federico bought more than a hoodie, folks. He bought a little bit of everything, I think. Whereas
hoodie, t-shirt, 2 mugs, and a notebook. 6 items.
I got the hoodie. Well, I always go saying I'm not going to get anything this year, and I always get something. I got the hoodie and I got a notebook, and I don't even know why I got a notebook, Federico. I don't write it in a notebook ever. But you know what? Now I'm going to have to, I guess.
Yeah.
It was. They asked me if they have silver and space gray were the colors they call for those notebooks.
Oh wow!
Did you get the dark one, the space gray one?
I think
that's
I did.
what I got.
I think I did. The mugs are made out of this Japanese porcelain, I think.
Oh.
Yeah.
They're very nice looking mugs. Very nice looking
mugs. $29, I think, something like that.
The merch is not cheap, that's for sure. But there's some nice stuff there.
Is anything that Apple makes cheap?
No.
So
no, not at all.
Overall, though, I would say like now for us the
real work begins.
The real work begins now, and obviously the plan, as it stands now, would be. Kind of a mirror of last year. I'm going to do iOS and iPadOS review. You're going to do macOS. Jonathan is going to do watchOS. Devon is going to do visionOS. So that's roughly the plan. Obviously, when you are at WWDC, you don't get to watch any sessions. You don't get to... From my perspective, I barely got through a single session video about app intents. But now, for the first part of my work will be the research. So gathering all documentation, watching the videos, taking notes. and later, I'll have to make a decision about the writing portion, which cannot begin now. Even if I wanted to, it cannot begin now because the iOS 26 beta does not install on my iPhone 16 Pro Max. This appears
Wow.
to be a widespread issue among some people. It just bricks my phone. So I was able to just restore my phone a few minutes ago to iOS 18 because I had to do the DFU mode thing. I tried a couple of
That's a
times.
pain.
It bricked my phone. So hopefully by beta 1 or maybe by beta 2 or maybe there'll be a revision to beta 1, we'll see. But as it stands now, I just have iPadOS 26 on my 13-inch iPad Pro. And
do you have a spare phone you could put it on that might work?
Yeah, I do. I do have a spare phone, but I just, I like to live with it and knowing myself.
No, I know, but I just mean in the meantime, if you want to start poking around the UI and that kind of thing.
I'll wait. I got plenty of reading to do. I got plenty of sessions to watch. And also, this is the kind of year where it's not a good idea to start writing now because the design is going to change a lot. And you don't want to, I've been burned by this before in the past.
Yep.
When you write an entire chapter of the review and then you got to throw it all away. More specifically, this happened to me in the summer of iOS 15 when Apple had the bed Safari redesign. And I wrote my whole thing, and then they went back to the previous version, or like they launched like a much more sort of a more balanced UI, and I had to throw it all in the trash.
Yeah, it was a lot. I remember that. And a little bit of that happened to me this past year with some of the Apple Intelligence stuff on the Mac, which was very, very rough for most of the beta period, and then tightened up a lot at the very end.
Yeah. So whenever there's a big design change, you don't want to pre-write anything, possibly at least until mid to late July. Usually the public beta is a good indicator of when things should sort of shake out. But again, Safari in iOS 15 was the exception because I believe they fixed it in late July to early August.
Yeah, it was pretty late in the game. And the thing is with design, I think design is more likely to change later in the game than most features. I think when it comes to like feature sets, public beta is a lot more telling about where things are going to end up in September. But with design, that seems like it continues to get tweaked throughout the summer. And I feel like one of the things that's important too at this stage of the game is not to let your opinions of the design set in stone too quickly because, we're seeing tons of hot takes. There are a lot of people who are upset about liquid glass. I don't feel like I've used it enough yet to really have an opinion one way or the other. Plus, that opinion may change between when I start using it and where we end up in September because I think that it's pretty clear that it's a beta. It's going to change to some degree, maybe a little bit, maybe a lot.
Yeah, but we are like, that happens because in many ways we are unfortunately in the hot take economy. And I witnessed this firsthand. I got to hang out with a lot of creators who usually like their work is mostly on like YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. This thing, like the hot take economy, I think applies to both ends of the spectrum, whether it's something that you're really excited about or something that you're really upset about. There's no middle ground. There's no nuance. And so I saw all these people take these really exciting videos saying this is the greatest design ever. This is the best thing Apple has ever done. Like, do we know that this design is the greatest thing that Apple has ever done? Do we know that it's the best thing ever? Probably not. But that's how the economy works, right? Because you got to get those clicks, you got to get those views, and you got to be in the algorithm, which... the asterisk here would be I also don't fault those people for doing that because it's just how the world is right now. So nuance doesn't pay off in social media because that's how social media works. And so we're sort of stuck in this situation where whenever you go online, something is either a nightmare or the greatest gift from the ghost of Steve Jobs, and you gotta find your middle ground, I guess, is what we're trying to say.
Yeah. Getting back to research for a second, though, one of the things that I did on the way home was, I spent Monday through Wednesday not looking at my RSS at all. So I went through something like 500 headlines. And I have a shortcut where I can send things to Readwise Reader with a Tahoe tag very easily and quickly. And I just did that over and over again whenever I found what looked like an interesting story, so I can kind of start reading those over this weekend. One of the things that I really liked about iPadOS 26 was that, you know how when you use unread with a shortcut, it switches over to shortcuts and then it flips back to unread. In iOS 8 or iPadOS 18, you literally are flipping back and forth between those if you're using them full screen. I just made the shortcuts window a little tiny window and put it behind unread. So all that would happen was it would pop to the front, and then I would tap and pop back to. Yeah, it was a really nice way of doing it. It was a lot less disruptive, a lot fewer animations, and it was a nicer way to kind of use that. So I did that, and then I went through all the videos that had been released and bookmarked all the ones that I wanted to watch.
I got to do that.
Basically, and basically anything having to do with macOS, but also app intents and, the design and a bunch of other kind of ones that are both either just personal interest, but also Tahoe. So I'm looking forward to digging into all that this weekend.
Yeah. The final thing I will say about that is that now this year, those session videos are also on YouTube, which means you can use Gemini to get a transcript out of every session video. So
They also have transcripts baked right into them if you use the developer app, and you can just highlight them, copy them, and paste them into things. That's what I may do that too. I mean, I took the press releases from the first day of WWDC and I dumped them into Notebook LM because I was just curious what kind of overview it would give me. And so this morning I went out to go get a coffee, and I had a 20-minute. One of those 20-minute mini
fake
pretend podcasts, fake podcasts that went through all the highlights. And it did really well. And it was a good, even though I know all that stuff, it was a nice way to kind of reinforce it on the back end now that I'm home and have had time to breathe and get some fresh air and get out of the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's when I ran into my friend, the turtle, Federico. I ran into a turtle on the sidewalk today.
Send me a picture of the turtle. Just a final thing before we move on to the post show. I think we're going to talk about automation and Apple Intelligence. John, we've been on a few briefings together.
Yes.
Can you confirm how many times have I asked if the workout buddy on the Apple Watch had a real name?
Several times. You seemed weirdly obsessed.
I just want the workout buddy to be named, I don't know, Andrew or something,
Yeah, you wanted the workout buddy to have a name. There's there's voice one and voice two.
It's a human voice.
I know. Well, it's a fake human voice, but that's how they do Siri too. Siri is just like voice one, voice two.
Yeah,
voice
but
three,
Siri has always been Siri, and it's like it sounds like a person name.
That's true. It has. Yeah, that's true. Well, Siri is a proper name, and but that would be pretty difficult to act. Right. To actually have the name Siri would be kind of difficult in this day and age, but there are people named Siri. It's just voice one, voice two, and it's Workout Buddy. You can, you can call the Workout Buddy, just call him Buddy, just like Buddy the Elf on the Christmas movie.
We'll see. I don't know.
All right.
Maybe Tom.
All right, Federico. Anything else you want to talk about before we go?
No, I think that's it. Sort of the behind the scenes of WWDC. That's
that was a lot of fun. A lot of fun. In the post show, we're going to talk a little bit about the rise of hybrid automation, which was a big theme, I think, of this year's WWDC.
Apple doesn't call it that, but we are. So
no, that's we coined that term. We're gonna make it stick one way or the other. Eventually, Apple PR will be emailing us about hybrid automation.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's it for today's episode, folks. Thanks again to Notion for sponsoring the show. And you can catch me and Federico over at MacStories.net and Club MacStories. We're also on social media where Federico is at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.